Well, thank you so much for joining us today at, I guess, everywhere. It's at the afternoon at this point, but we are so happy today to have Rachel Croskery-Roberts and Ezra Ross from UC Irvine with us today to discuss their recent publication in the Perspectives Law Journal. So if you have not met us, I guess I should have gone to this slide. If you haven't met us before, here we all are, and you can see us all on video. But we're very fortunate today to have them here with us. We're going to go ahead and get into a little bit of a conversation about their piece and the project that they work on at their school, but I will kind of allow them to go ahead and introduce themselves quickly.
Sure. I'm Rachel Croskery-Roberts. I'm the Associate Dean for Lawyering Skills at UCI.
And I'm Ezra Ross, and I work at UCI doing lawyering skills, and I teach lawyering skills and skills classes, and I write about things like pro bono and empathic lawyering.
And I guess if you haven't met me before, my name is Holly Lynch Fritz, and I am Business Development Manager for TR. I also serve as kind of the liaison for Perspective. So this is kind of how this came to fruition. But we'll kind of go ahead and get started. So we'll start with Rachel. Can you just tell us a little bit about the project, kind of in a broad context, if we've never, heard about the interviewing project, just history, a little bit of the reasoning, and just kind of what went behind it?
Sure. Yeah. So as we just mentioned in our introduction, Ezra and I both work in the Lawyering Skills program at UCI. Ezra came from UCLA, I came from Michigan. We didn't have programs like this at either institution that we came from. As you probably know, we're a relatively young law school, and the school and its staff and faculty tried from the very beginning to really reimagine and rethink legal education. And part of that involved a deep commitment to infusing both practical training and public service across the curriculum, and not just confining it to one small part of the student experience. So there are a lot of reasons why a law school might consider introducing lawyering experiences beyond simulations in the first year. I'm just going to talk a little bit about a few of the goals that we were trying to accomplish through this project, which is part of the Lawyering Skills course. It lives in the 1L Lawyering Skills course. We've been doing this since the beginning of the law school. Ezra and I did not start the program. It started in 2009. I took over the program in 2011 when I arrived. And Ezra came on board 2 years ago. Is that right, Ezra? Yeah. So I guess, first of all, we wanted to expand on the basic skills taught in a traditional lawyering skills course. Because we were trying to do things differently, UCI deliberately created a program, a lawyering skills program that tries to move beyond the traditional research and writing skills, explicitly introducing additional skills like fact investigation, problem solving, an introduction to contract drafting, and relevant to this conversation, interviewing and counseling. We also try to serve as a bridge to the mandatory clinics that the students will take in their second or third years of law school. So another thing we wanted to do was hopefully to introduce critical competencies like client-centered lawyering and cross-cultural awareness early and often in law school, and not waiting until the clinics, only having that kind of stuff going on in the clinics or through lectures. Lectures and simulations are certainly a start, but reinforcing the material through actual experiences with local pro bono organizations and government agencies is just better. At least we think so. And then third, we wanted to connect students to lawyers in the community to allow for networking and for exposure to a broader range of types of lawyering models. And then I guess finally, one of the core founding principles of our law school was a commitment to public service. And this project reinforces the value of getting our students serving the community in which the students live and work from the really pretty close to from the moment they arrive at law school.
That's awesome. And it kind of goes into the next question that I had for Ezra, but why 1Ls? So you kind of got into that a bit, but I think traditionally people, think of maybe these skills for upper level courses. Like what makes 1L special for this type of, interaction or project?
Yeah, and I think that this question really goes to the heart of what our program is about, because I mean, you can imagine a critic asking this question and saying, is this really the right demographic, right? Because I mean, we're talking about a cohort of students that hasn't yet had a full slate of doctrinal classes, hasn't had sort of formal training through a clinical program. Arguably, they should be focusing on foundational stuff like learning to read cases. And maybe this kind of programming is ultimately just sort of a distraction from that. But from our perspective, and this is backed up by the literature, so there's scholarship on this that suggests that having this sort of experiential content all 3 years is actually the ideal, right? This is the gold standard. And Rachel's already referenced some of the reasons why we think that's true. A few other sort of glosses on that would be that I think this kind of real experience can serve as a nice counterweight to what otherwise might feel like a kind of a book heavy first year, at least to some students. I think that also giving 1Ls kind of a taste of this sort of experience in their first year, I think can help build momentum in students to continue to do experiential learning and to continue to do service work as well, which is important to us as an institution. And then Rachel indicated this, but just put a little bit differently, that's what we do, right? If we're scholars, we all have our special gloss on all these things. So I'm going to do that. Yeah, look, we are committed as an institution to experiential learning and service. And so this kind of program where we say, not only does everybody at our institution, all the students need to do a clinical, they need to get involved as 1Ls in this work. That really, I think, helps us to credibly say that, we don't just say we're committed to these things, but we actually walk the walk.
That definitely sounds impactful and makes sense, like organically for your whole program. So that's probably makes that pretty unique. So Rachel, I think kind of with that, it sounds, obviously like it is a really good fit, fits really well in the 1L curriculum for you guys. And just kind of, can you walk us through just how it works kind of in general, and then we'll kind of dig in a little bit as well.
Sure. So I'll give you kind of a sense of from a broadly speaking, the typical structure. So like I said, this lives in the Loring Skills class. So the project is one module of the 6-unit 2-semester Loring Skills course that we have in the first year. There are 2 broad components to the interviewing project. The first is a classroom component, and so their students receive basic instruction in client counseling and interviewing techniques and issues of cultural competency. We have 8 faculty members in Loring Skills, and many of the members of our faculty in this program accomplish it through a unit that blends background lecture and readings with model interviews and experiential components. The simulated interviews could be freestanding, or they could be related to another substantive writing problem in the course or something in between. So for example, I do a freestanding unit where students interview a mock client who's been fired from their job and would like to sue their former employer for wrongful termination. I assign all students the role of attorney or client. I meet with each group separately to help the attorneys strategize and talk with the clients as well about, what they might or might not reveal depending on how well the person interviewing them conducts the interview.
Right. That's an art.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And then once they complete the simulation, we debrief in class. They don't have, one thing that sometimes people ask is about the research part. They don't have to spend time researching the relevant employment law for my simulation because although it is a freestanding exercise, it comes on the tail end of a major research project I have them do in another part of the course that exposes them to the relevant law related to wrongful termination. So although the simulation is freestanding, it's based on the same law that they were working on in a previous exercise. So it also helps with some of that crossover stuff, transference of learning. Yeah. Once the internal basic instruction is complete, each student is assigned to work with an organization. And through that organization, they get specific instruction and guidance about the organization's client base, their cases, and any expectations in interviews. Each student then observes an attorney conducting an interview, conducts all or part of an interview under observation, and receives feedback on the interview. Different organizations do it, slightly differently, right? We don't impose the structure of the organization. So some organizations may also have students present the case orally or in writing to a group of attorneys and make recommendations where others don't. At its largest point, we, just to give you a sense of the scope of this, in 2018, 2019, we placed 230 students for interviews with something like 10 organizations, ranging from government agencies like the Labor Commissioner to the Public Defender's Office to general and specialized legal aid programs. One of the fun little things that I like to share about this is that, although last year they were too busy to work with us, and I hope they'll come back, but one of the programs we now work with is the Elder Law and Disability Rights Center, which was actually, as a young law school, we actually got to watch. That center was co-created by one of our graduates who went through this interviewing project as a 1L, developed a passion for pro bono through her time in law school, and ended up leaving law school and eventually founding this organization that now works with our students. So one other thing, I guess, because the class size was so large that year, because I think this is helpful if I might be jumping the gun on questions, but I think this is helpful on we are a relatively small school. And so but that one year we were much larger. And so if you're thinking about like, how could I possibly do this at a school that's much bigger? One thing that we also did in the year that we had so many was to partner with our pro bono director to use some placements through her office, allowing our students to go as far as Tijuana for a border rights project. We also expanded to use an organization that provides phone interviews for those who couldn't travel to the organization's offices, which was kind of a precursor to some of the things we did during COVID, which Ezra, I think, is going to talk more about. That allowed us to increase capacity. It was a different experience than the students who did in-person interviews. I think one of the biggest growing pains that you will find if you try to do something like this is providing a consistent experience for students across so many organizations. It's something we grapple with and are happy to talk about.
Yeah, I think you hit all of the spots. No, I think one of the questions really was like that someone submitted was just like scalability, and that's I think definitely would be a concern. And then I just think that kind of where does it fit in the normal curriculum? And you gave two really great examples of like how it kind of can function. I think there's always that like concern of, gosh, we teach so much, and there's like, how do we cover, like, how does LRW cover the entire universe of everything that needs to be covered? I can't add one more thing. But that's I'm sorry, just one thing. That's
this
perfect.
Only takes between 2 and 3 class sessions, which I know I say only, that's a lot, but a lot of this is outside of our classroom, which is one of the ways.
How many sessions do you typically have, like, out of, like, what percentage would that be? This wasn't something that I pre-asked you, so I'm trying
to think, gosh, so how many classes do we have in the spring? I'm trying, we meet 2 days a week for an hour and a half, and I typically have 1 or 2 session, between 1 and 3 sessions on interviewing in the classroom out of a 14 or 15 week semester that has, 30 sessions. This takes.
No, I think that's perfect. I know some people I've chatted with have like 6 sessions, like those smaller, sessions. So kind of a percentage just came up. So Ezra, kind of, Rachel touched on this a bit, but you guys bring in, practicing attorneys, and that's something that really stands out in the article. It seems like it's like a huge, important part of the project in general. But I mean, do you believe it's imperative? Why is it imperative, and what makes it, kind of the, secret special part of it?
Yeah, so it's absolutely imperative. Our partners, right? So the community organizations with which we work and the practicing attorneys that get involved with this program are crucial to the way the program operates, and not just for the obvious reason that, you know, these are students. And so as a practical and as a legal matter, they can't be doing any of this stuff just on their own. We need attorney supervision to be part of this for this to work. So there's that. But then in addition, and Rachel has alluded to this, I think that there are other benefits from having these outside attorneys play a role. So part of it is that role modeling idea that Rachel mentioned. I think it's, you know, it's great for our 1Ls to sort of have their lawyering skills instructors and the other doctrinal professors, but getting this opportunity to see some, you know, a diverse range of different public interest lawyers out there role modeling how to do this, I think can be really impactful for the students. And then, as Rachel also mentioned, there's the connection with the organization, right? I mean, our students may later want to extern with this organization or find work at this organization. And so developing that connection now, you know, in their first year, it's not too early from our perspective. And then finally, I think that, you know, related to that, we are able to sustain and improve our relationship institutionally. So as a law school, our relationship with those outside community organizations by having this annual back and forth, right? Those outside attorneys, they get to have this, I think, really enriching experience of getting to mentor law students. And we get to send hardworking, capable students out into the field to do this important work. And I think that that helps us keep these relationships fresh and really good from the perspective of community members, community organizations, and from the institution's perspective too.
Yeah, that's I wouldn't have thought of that. I mean, obviously read the article, but even like beyond that, that just isn't something that you would think of in like the broader context, or at least I didn't, as far as the institution level. And especially I'm imagining in person, like people are coming to the campus and, you know, seeing what's going on, getting, you know, that interaction with students and kind of, being a part of it. So that seems like it would be really, really important. So I think obviously at this point in the conversation, we can tell, you know, it's beneficial to students. This is something that would, you know, benefit students in long run in the whole, you know, scheme of things. And, you know, all of those wonderful things. But what are some key benefits that you see, like tangible, big, you know, big 3-4 things that you see, you know, from students? So we'll kick it back to Rachel for this.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, some of this I'll reframe. I'll do it the scholarly reframing of things that Ezra said. But first of all, there are so many benefits. I also don't want to. One thing I didn't talk about earlier when I was talking about it were some of the logistical challenges. I talked about some of it, but I don't want to pretend like this is just an easy thing to implement and do. So, but there really are a lot of benefits. You know, some of them are things I've already talked about, like infusing skills across the curriculum. I just think the students see the relevance of law school, you know, when they're actually early on, getting those, you know, critical interviewing and counseling skills, such critical lawyering skills, getting exposure to that early and often. I also think, you know, we talk a lot about how do you teach professionalism? Can you teach professionalism? How do you teach professional judgment? Is that something you just figure out on your own? Like, those are tough concepts and things we all want to hope that we can teach our students. And I don't think we can. I think I've come to the conclusion that you can't totally do it in a classroom. You can tell students, this is what it's going to be like in practice. This is what it's going to be. This is what they will expect of you. Trust me that it's XYZ. But they get to experience really early on working in a professional capacity and applying what they're learning in law school to real world situations. It's light, right? It's not a huge lift for them. We're not sending them out to go represent clients, right? That's well beyond the scope of what one could do at this stage, but it gives them some of that actual professional experience. I also think I'm going to just cheat and say one benefit that it's not the students. I think it's another institutional benefit, which is that although we all teach skills, and I know Ezra has actually written on the importance of continuing to do pro bono work as a faculty member, right, and being out in the community, it's really easy. I've been teaching for 20 years now, and I'm supposed to be telling students what's going on in the world now, not was going on in the world back when I was practicing, but what's expected now. What does the work world look like now? And this project allows us to have a very real finger on the pulse of what the expectations are right now with a range of organizations. And which I think bleeds over into our teaching of lawyering skills and making sure that we're actually, as professors offering, we can have more credibility when we say this is what you're going to be expected to do in practice. Other things I think that are relevant include helping students develop cultural competency and develop a respect for and hopefully a love of pro bono work, because I don't know that everyone agrees, but I think that it's critical, and I know Ezra agrees with me. Other people may not, but and then it has been a fantastic, and Ezra touched on this, but it's been a fantastic networking tool for students and for the law school. Students are able to connect with lawyers in the community. Some have gone on to work with and for the organizations they have partnered with through this program. And then I guess the final benefit, although just that I'll talk about in the interest of time, is the first year of, we all know this, the first year of law school can be so stressful and intimidating, that students can, and competitive and all sorts of things, that students can forget why they came to law school in the first place. And often, if they make it through with any of their self-esteem left unscathed, after the first year, some of them will reignite their passion in their summer jobs after their 1L year. But this project allows students, I think, to reconnect and reignite their passion by actually moving outside themselves and the rigors of law school to serve their communities and gain hands-on experience. And that kind of goes back to the why 1Ls, that this, I think this really does help connect students to why they came to law school in the first place, at a time when they may be at their lowest.
I don't remember being in the law school library at 2 a.m. studying contracts at all. That was uplifting.
Right. We all have our trauma stories, right?
Yes, my LRW professor is actually on here, so I could really go into some good, make her feel bad. Yeah, no, but that makes total sense. It really gives you just that whole reason of why students come to law school. And that's just, I feel like that must be so impactful for a 1L, just to have that, the feeling of it. Even, you come to law school and you get in that first classroom and it's not maybe what you expected being a lawyer would be like, which isn't really anyway, but so kind of, I think the next really interesting part of this, and this is more of a timing, piece, is, when you wrote this piece, it was, we were in the thick of the pandemic. How did this transform the project? And then kind of on that same note, like, obviously we're still ongoing with that. Has anything evolved since since the piece has come out, or since you wrote the piece, and all of those good pandemic things?
Yeah, so this project, as you've heard, we believe that there are important benefits. The pandemic, in some ways, I think it's not too much of an exaggeration to say that it really posed kind of an existential challenge to the project in a way, because there was the question of sort of how do we mold the project to work right now, but there was even a threshold question of, like, is this even the right time to be doing this, right? In fall of 2020, we were admitting our first class of fully remote students, right? Which just raises this host of difficulties And of course, that's all happening because we've got this constantly evolving worldwide pandemic, which is leading to all these other stressors and difficulties. And so, I mean, we had to take a good hard look at what we wanted to do. And ultimately, we decided that the benefits of the program were too great to sacrifice the program. And so we kept it going. We did make some changes. So for the year 2020 to 2021, last academic year, we moved the program to all virtual. So all interviews were either on the phone or over Zoom. We didn't do in-person interviewing. We felt that that change was necessary just to sort of take care of our students, to make sure that the organizations and their lawyers, that the community members we're trying to serve, that everyone is safe. So we did need to make that change. Now, you asked, Holly, whether things have kept on changing during the course of the pandemic. And yeah, I mean, this has been an exercise in adaptation for sure. So just as a couple of examples of things we've kind of done on the fly as needed with the program. First, we took on a new organization. So as Rachel mentioned, there are some organizations who have been with us from the beginning or close to the beginning of this program. But this year, we took on a new organization, and this is this fantastic San Francisco-based public interest organization. We just love them. We're so happy to have them in the program. And note, this would be an organization that in the past, right? So as the program was originally thought of, we wouldn't necessarily have brought this organization on because they're in San Francisco. We're in Irvine. We're trying to do in-person interviews. That doesn't work. But in some ways, sort of the pandemic opened up this sort of possibility because now we've got this openness to using these remote interviews. So that's new, and that's been great so far. We're really happy to have done that. We've also had to pivot very recently. So this January, just last month, our community was getting hit by the Omicron wave, as most were. And so at University of California, Irvine, our classes went online in January. They had been in person throughout the fall. And we had interviews lined up for students scheduled in January in person. And we had to pivot fast, right? So basically we had to reschedule this stuff. We had to reach out to the organizations, make sure that the organizations could accommodate to do these things virtually because we wanted to stay in line with what the university was doing. And again, we wanted to make sure that our students were safe, that the community members were safe, that the organizations were safe. And so that's definitely been a challenge, but I think a worthy one as we've kind of muddled through the pandemic. I also, by the way, I could sort of talk about our current thinking on sort of what we've taken from the pandemic now.
Yeah, I think that's perfect because I think like the next part, kind of the thought process, at least, where my mind goes is like attorneys have gone to digital client interviews and hearings all over the country. And it seems like some of that might stay. Just kind of looking at it, it might be a long-term, piece. So, are you guys considering having some of those, integrating some of those digital pieces and keeping some of those pivots and plus what you were talking about.
No, you're right. So, I mean, there's some inertia or momentum headed in that direction. So these considerations are absolutely on our radar screen, right? Because doing this remote thing, it opens up the ability for us to help organizations and community members near and far. That's like a fantastic plus for us. In addition, what we found is that doing remote interviews actually has some significant benefits for the interviewees, so the members of the community who we're talking to. Sometimes these are individuals who can't easily get time off of work, who are going to have it's going to be challenging for them to find transportation to get out to a public interest organization. And so being able to do these remotely has really kind of broadened the scope of who we can reach out to here. We also found, by the way, that there are some people we were talking to, some community members who would find it stressful to do that in-person first interview with a room and there's a lawyer and a law student, it's very formal, right? That can be potentially stressful for some people. Doing this in a way where it's remote, where people can do this from the comfort of their home or on their phone, can really raise their comfort level. And again, I think that helps us serve better. So these are benefits, right? And Holly, as you said, there is that inertia in practice potentially to do more stuff remotely. And part of that, I think, is about the pandemic, but part of that is just about cost pressure. Right? I mean, there's certain fields where there's pressure on lawyers to do things in a lean and mean way and really contain costs. And that was there even before the pandemic. So these are all reasons why we're taking very seriously the possibility of, continuing on with some of this. And at the same time, and then I'll get out of this, at the same time, we do feel that the face-to-face, when we can make that happen with a student and an individual from the community who needs help, that can be a transformational thing, that kind of reality to kind of complement the theory of the first year is really kind of indispensable. So we're definitely not at the point of saying, okay, no more of that. I think we want to maintain that, but we're having a conversation about how to bring these things together for sure.
No, that makes total sense. And yeah, there's so many conversations about that, but we'll get through our questions because I'm seeing some questions are coming in as well. Obviously, I think both of your passion for this is just like palpable. You can tell it, in the words that you speak about it and the words that you write. But what drives your passion, to continue this project? What are some success stories that stand out? You've already talked to someone that talked about students that went through the project and started their own organizations, so that's probably one. But anything else that just stands out to you?
I guess I can take that, or at least part of it. So I mean, you have to, I'm not gonna lie, you have to be passionate about doing something like this because it's, especially to the other lawyering skills faculty members on the call, that it's not a job for the faint-hearted to begin with. And, to do something, to imagine something like this in the 1L year takes some work. But it's, giving students real practical experience. I know I just keep saying that. It's just so critical. And I'll mention just a couple of moments or successes. I don't know if you'd call them successes or moments or whatever they are, but stories that I like to tell about, the anecdotes that I like to tell about the program that I really love. One of them was really, really early on in the program. And today we're talking about this interviewing project kind of in a vacuum, but it is part of the larger reimagining of legal education that we have at UCI Law. So we also have a very robust pro bono program. We have something like 98% of our students engage in pro bono in their 3 years of law school. We have mandatory clinics, so all of this kind of works together. So early on in the program, a group of UCI Law students, they were 2Ls and 3Ls, so they'd already gone through the interviewing project as 1Ls. And they were doing a pro bono project through the pro bono office, and they had gotten on a bus to go to the Inland Empire. For those who don't know California, it's a little ways away from here. So they were on a bus with a number of young attorney volunteers. So the bus was a bunch of very young attorneys doing some volunteer pro bono work, and our students. And one of the attorneys, they were all talking on the bus, and one of the attorneys mentioned being really nervous to do what I guess was going to be his first real interview. And he was an attorney, and he asked if there were other people on the bus who were in the same boat, who were nervous. And, several attorneys mentioned that this was really their first unassisted interview that they were going to do, that they'd maybe observed or whatever. But all of our law students had conducted at least one, and many of them more than one interview. And it was just such a confidence booster for our students to be seen as having more practical experience in some areas than even the young practicing attorneys on the bus. And that, they were all just so thrilled about the experience. And then I guess another one, as I mentioned, those connections that we've been making have been really outstanding with outside organizations, have been outstanding for our students. Some have gone on to work summer jobs for organizations, and a couple have even ended up doing with post-law school employment with organizations that they started working with through our project as 1Ls, and then continued with projects via our pro bono office. And then I think this kind of relates just a little to the question that I know we'll eventually get to,
Yes.
Stephen Holliday's question there, but
Yes.
we had but I think it also ignites, I see it sometimes ignite passion in students for public service, even students who didn't have that or maybe have different interests, so they can see that you can have more than one interest, even if you want to go into corporate law or you want to go into a big law firm, that you may find that there's still a role for this kind of work in your professional career. And so, many of our students come to UCI because of our public service mission, but not all of them, right? And I was at a public interest, we were honoring our public interest partners, and they had all come in by invitation of our pro bono office. And I ended up sitting at the table with one of the people from one of the organizations that we've worked with. And he told me a story about one of the people we had sent through the project to him. And he said that the students showed up for the interview and confessed that they really didn't have any interest in pro bono work. Like, that was their, hi, nice to meet you. It was a little embarrassing for us from a professionalism standpoint that our student was like, hi, nice to meet you. I don't really want to be here and I don't want to do this. But through that project, they ended up really falling in love with the work that their assigned organization was doing. And this attorney was telling me that the student had then returned as a 2L to do, that their attitude towards pro bono work had shifted, and that they went on to volunteer for the organization throughout law school. And so things like that are just exciting to hear. We also have students who do it and think it's no big deal and move on. I don't want to pretend like every story is like that. But those are the moments that I think really reinforce why we're doing this.
So kind of we're short on time. So I'm kind of going to turn this into, advice / open it up to questions, because I think that kind of will cross over pretty well. All right. So Stephen asks, what does your law school do to adequately bifurcate first-year law students by prior experience and future goals as attorneys? For example, some goals involve different practice areas, such as transactional law. So is there a pairing program? Or
I'm happy to take this, and then maybe if Ezra wants to jump in. So the first thing I'll say is I'm just going to, it's funny that you say this, because I was just having a conversation 2 days ago, I think, with one of our tax law professors about what the role might be of moving more transactional law into the first year, and whether that makes sense, or whether we should be doing more upper division stuff. So those conversations are ongoing, and I do know, we have between a third to half of students will go off to do work that's not this kind of work, right? So I guess my short answer is probably we're not doing it in this program like that. So part of it is bringing in other practice areas. Not a lot of that is happening through this interviewing project. We have added another component. We could have an entire additional conversation if we wanted about, we've added a transactional law component to the Learning Skills program that's separate from this and does not involve work with outside organizations, and it is just simulations in the classroom. And we also have upper division skills courses where we work on, I actually teach an advanced legal writing contract drafting course that a lot of the students who are interested in going into corporate work take. We did early on, kind of within the interviewing program, try to, and this actually would get to, if you have a question about advice you want to give somebody trying to do this, there's kind of a crossover here. Early on, we gave students much more say in where they went And so we had a list of organizations, and we would have students prioritize, do you want to go work for the, if you have an interest in employment law, do you want to go work for the labor commissioner? And if you have an interest in, criminal work, we'll try to pair you with the public defender's office. If you have a real strong interest, we'll pair you with the alt PD, because those are actually felony cases. And, so we tried really hard. And when we were really small, we were able to do that. Like when we first started, we had 60 students to place, and then 80, then 90. And then, like I said, at the largest, it was 230 students. We gave up. I'm just going to be totally honest with you on that, and decided that the skills that we're trying to give them through this project are transferable. And so trying to trying to pair people in that way became too difficult. We do a little bit of it, but not nearly as much as we used to. We used to really try to prioritize, and it just became unmanageable. The program was not manageable to try to pair people with exactly their interest area. The way in which you can do a little bit of that is that, like I said, we do now work with our pro bono office and getting some organizations. And so some students do have some flexibility if they want to meet their requirement of this program through volunteer things with the pro bono office. They can pick projects that interest them if the ones that we have set up are not as interesting to them.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, yeah, so there are logistical reasons, I think, that just make it hard to do that kind of bifurcation. But I'd also just add that, at least from my perspective, I think there's something to be said for having the students, especially in the first year, get exposure to areas and organizations that they might not have preferenced themselves. I mean, you heard that story from Rachel about, a student who didn't anticipate enjoying the experience at all, and then it really made a surprising impact. And so I think that, yeah, part of it is logistical challenge, but then part of it is, I do think there's a reasoned justification, particularly in the first year, to have some exposure to things that students wouldn't otherwise choose, especially given that in their second and third years, they get to pick what clinic they're going to do. They get to pick what doctrinal classes they're going to do. This is like a good shot for us to be able to say, let's get some people into this public interest work. Let's give them a taste and see if it builds some momentum, for what it's worth.
Yeah. I think so. Let's see, we have one more question, but I know we're short on time, so I don't want to keep everyone, but we'll take this last one if you guys are fine with that.
Yeah, good for me.
Brutal choices in curricular design is a feature in perspectives for good reason. Good ideas and components of lawyering programs come at the expense of other, more traditional instruction modules. What had to give when UCI incorporated experiences like this in the 1L curriculum? And what advice do you have for making room for things like this without diluting the more traditional foundational instruction too much? That's a big question and an important one. So whoever wants to take that, well.
What do you mean? We don't give anything up. Are you?
You have it all.
We do it all. No, I mean, it does. You do have to, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I know the audience I'm talking to, but it's hard to know how many credits. One thing I will say is, this is a 6-credit class. And when I was at, I came from Michigan where it was a 4-credit class, so one thing is we just got more credits, and I'm just going to be honest about that. And so it does require commitment beyond just the lawyering skills class, unless you already have some credits and want to give some things up. I'll say one thing we gave up, that when I was at Michigan, I taught, I did 2 motions, for example, in the spring. I only do 1 major motion now, so that I have room for some of these other skills. But the way in which we've had, there are no more credits available. I get it. Yep. I totally get it. It's a constant conversation. Are you giving them enough to, you don't want to give students such an introduction, such a thin introduction to so many skills that you really just equip them for malpractice rather than actually learn anything. And so, yeah, it's hard. This one thing that we were able to do, and I think can be helpful even if you don't get more credits. Like I said, we only do a few classes on this. If you can convince if you can get the registrar or whoever schedules, one big thing that helps us is that we get 2 half days of the student's schedule in the spring that are just left open. So it has nothing to do with giving us more credits. It has everything to do with buying space in their schedule, which we work with the registrar and the senior associate dean to make sure that there's like a Tuesday morning and a Friday afternoon that the 1Ls don't have other classes, including ours, so that they can go to the organizations to do. And so that's not a credit thing. That's just be flexible with the schedule. If you can convince them to at least be flexible with the 1L schedule so that you can buy the space for them to do some of these projects, that can work too.
And is there time or no? I'm good.
Yeah, no, I mean, we're running over. I don't want to say no, don't speak, but go.
Oh, go.
I don't know.
I just think that Eugene's question it's an important one, because this is in some ways always the question when you're thinking about trying to cram more into lawyering skills. I would just say from my perspective real quick, I'd probably want to be teaching something with interviewing or counseling in my lawyering skills class, even if we didn't have the interviewing project out in the world, just because to me, I think having some of that interpersonal communication instruction is really important, just to counterbalance all the research and all the writing, given that our students are going to go out there and they got to talk to people. So I feel like we got to do something with that. So in a way, here's one way to look at it, is this kind of saves us some time, maybe even, because we do instruction in class, and then some of the instruction is actually done, the training is done by the outside organizations for their particular kinds of cases and interviews. And so in a way you could look at this, maybe this is too rosy a picture, but optimistically, this is a way there's some synergy there where, yeah, you need to keep a couple classes, but maybe you were going to teach that anyway, and you get some extra training that you don't need to use for class time. So maybe that's a way in which it potentially works.
I'm glad I let you go on, but thank you everyone so much for coming today. And, thank you so much, Ezra and Rachel. And I feel like this is a conversation that this community could go on and on about. And, there's so many questions, and there's, such great discussion, and just such a cool project. It was just great to chat. We will have this up. The faculty resource page recently launched. It is open to everyone, so it's not like closed behind your Westlaw password. The recording will be posted here, and you can check out perspectives on that page as well. And also has some really good resources that we're putting together, for fall, spring, and everything. So a good resource to have as well. But please reach out. To me, I'm a resource, and I'm sure these guys would answer questions for you as well if you reach out, but I didn't want to give their contact information. This is mine. If anyone needs anything, please reach out to me, and we're always happy to help, give feedback, and have more programs like this. But thank you for participating today, and for all the feedback. I really appreciate it. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Thank you.